And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got? Policy and markets, elections, current events. The broadcast master tells us how to win. I said, policy and markets, elections and current events. The broadcast master shows us how to win. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Gonna talk markets, gonna talk politics, great for the generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Got cash money, talking politics, great for generations. Oh, what a mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Yes, indeed. Hello, my friends. Sometimes on a Monday, you gotta just let the whole song play. Welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, once again, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, saying style, in partnership with the Washington Examiner, as we do our level best to make sense out of nonsense. And it is indeed such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. As always, here on the program, if you have not done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Follow me on Twitter and be sure to tweet at me too, at Saying Center. That's saying with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And of course, please make sure that you like the Facebook page too, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. And like, subscribe, follow, all those good things to our friends at the Washington Examiner on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course at WashingtonExaminer.com. Great to be with you today. We're going to talk about leadership and politics in a time of turmoil with Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communication and crisis coach, who always just has phenomenal insights on political dynamics, on the different issues of the day and how they're presented in the media, how they're presented by politicians and elected officials. We can look at leadership. We can look at presentation styles. We can look at so many different things and angles with Roshini Rajkumar, and I'm looking forward to having her back here on Jimmy at the Crossroads to talk a bit about the DNC, the RNC, and what's happening with the chaos across the country. And that's sort of where I want to start with today here on the program. We saw more riots, more chaos going on over the weekend. This time in Portland, we saw Trump supporters who did sort of a caravan in downtown Portland, I think it was, and ended up in a tragic death. And it's just, it is, you can see some of the chaos on the screen there. It is sad what is happening across the country. It is genuinely disheartening to know and understand that what's happening in America is spreading, and it is continuing, and it is not going anywhere. That is what we need to keep in mind as we look at the landscape, too, of 2020, but also in terms of our society today, when this is ongoing, this is continuing. And what does the mayor of Portland do when he is challenged by President Trump and others, called out for a failure of leadership on his part as the leader of his local community? Keep in mind, people are saying on the left, oh, this is Trump's America. Remember, this is happening in Trump's America. But Donald Trump is not responsible for policing these local communities. In fact, the left doesn't even want national law enforcement folks on the ground in their cities trying to help enforce law and order or even protect federal property. If I recall correctly, the federal government was in Portland and Seattle for a brief span of time and then basically pulled back. That shows that what's happening in these cities is incumbent upon the local communities in the states to deal with, on the city mayors, city councils, city police, not on President Trump. But so the mayor of Portland, he had this to say, addressing President Trump directly in Cut 13.
President Trump, for 4 years, we've had to live with you and your racist attacks on black people. We learned early about your sexist attitudes towards women. We've had to endure clips of you mocking a disabled man. We've had to listen to your anti-democratic attacks on journalists. We've read your tweets slamming private citizens to the point of receiving death threats. And we've listened to your attacks on immigrants. We've listened to you label Mexicans rapists. We've heard you say that John McCain wasn't a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And now you're attacking Democratic mayors and the very institutions of democracy that have served this nation well since its founding. Do you seriously wonder, Mr. President, why this is the first time in decades that America has seen this level of violence? It's you who have created the hate and the division. It's you who have not found a way to say the names of black people killed by police officers, even as people in law enforcement have. And it's you who claimed that white supremacists are good people. Your campaign of fear is as anti-democratic as anything you've done to create hate and vitriol.
All right, that's enough. That's enough. Let's
Country.
get Ted Wheeler, mayor of Portland, off the screen because he is spewing nonsense through and through. So many falsities, too many to even count in there. What we are hearing are tropes about President Trump that have been repeated, going back to that escalator speech with the comment about the rapists, and to the notion of white supremacists are good people. Both of those are narratives that the left has presented for years now about those instances, those incidents that are not true, that are not what President Donald Trump actually said. And he says, it's you. It's you who's created the hate and division. No, first of all, this is something that has been festering in our society for quite some time. It has erupted this year, particularly, as I argued months ago, because of COVID-19 and people being shut away for so long, the emotions building up, and then you had the spark of the tragedy, what happened, the murder of George Floyd. And that really lit the fire, got the flames going of the chaos that we're seeing. And then what happens? Well, President Trump tries to enforce law and order, and the Democrats don't want it. The Democrats undermine it by supporting, or at least condoning or accepting, tolerating, at a minimum, tolerating the rioting that we have been seeing in the streets. Only just in the last week have they started changing their tune and condemning the violence and mayhem that has been going on across the country. You can't say it's you when Ted Wheeler is unwilling and unable to actually show strength and deal with all the chaos and the mayhem that has engulfed his city. He is trying to deflect the blame from where it belongs in that local community and say, oh, it is President Trump who is responsible. I will be the first to say that President Trump has not been messaging right in terms of Twitter, has been confrontational in ways that I think go beyond what he should do as president of the United States. Fair. But to put this at his feet is nonsense and wrong. He's the one who's actually trying to prevent and to cry foul about the violence and the looting and the rioting and the pain and the anguish that has engulfed these cities. That is what President Trump has been doing. Well, Ted Wheeler has tolerated it, has allowed it to fester and to grow, and he is the mayor of his own city. This is the prime example of a politician deflecting. Full stop. That is all that Ted Wheeler is doing, as we see footage of the malaise that we have seen. I'm not talking about the economic malaise. I'm talking about the violence and the chaos. The mayor of Portland, one of those critical cities, he's trying to deflect. He's trying to deflect. Let's put up the video one more time of Portland, Mr. Matoush, and what went on over the weekend in Portland, Oregon. Because this kind of thing is ongoing there. Deflection isn't leadership. Virtue signaling is not leadership. What is leadership is trying to enforce the law and to guide people towards appropriate, responsible, and respectful conduct. And that's not what Ted Wheeler has done. That's why he's blaming President Trump, and that's it. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. We're going to take a break here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. When we come back, we're going to dive in to the leadership crisis in America right now, what we're seeing with all the chaos across the country, and the Republican and Democratic national conventions, how they unfolded, some of the optical discussions, and more with strategic communications and crisis coach Roshini Rajkumar right here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Once again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner with engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Don't go anywhere.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Certainly we want to be safe. We want our fellow citizens to be safe. But there is never a time to short-skirt the Bill of Rights.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Hi, Tom. Gee, you look terrible.
I feel terrible. Achy, fevery, nauseous.
Ooh, that's too bad. You know, you ought to...
Chills, stuffiness, bloating.
Yeah, you know...
Scratchy, gassy, dripping.
I know! Say, Tom, you should try Wear-a-Flu.
Wear-a-Flu?
Wear-a-Flu is the only medication that actually takes your flu symptoms and hides them at various places inside your body, so that by the time your body finds them all, your flu is gone. In the meantime, you're back to work.
You were right, Ed. Wear-a-Flu lets me ignore my flu symptoms and gets me back to work. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and infecting the rest of the office.
Come out wherever you are with Wear-a-Flu. Take as directed.
And now, the further future adventures of Starship Winkler.
Thanks for coming to this medical convention with me, Captain. You're a true friend.
You promised there'd be green women.
Well, I'd like you to meet some of my colleagues. This is Dr. Scholes, podiatrist.
How do you do?
And this is Dr. Pepper.
Gesundheit.
Oh, and here comes Dr. Phil. He's a psychiatrist.
Well, every pancake has two sides. And
You're right, Doc. He is boring.
I'm right here.
And this is Dr. Spock, child psychologist.
Goodgy.
And of course, this is Dr. Octopus.
Oh, hello. How do you do?
How do you do?
How do you do? Hi, give me five. Pleased to meet you. Give me five. How do you do?
You do.
So, Doc Ock, what's your field?
I am a proctologist.
Oh, I wish I hadn't shaken all 8 hands.
Well, did the captain bring enough hand sanitizer? Tune in next time when we hear...
And this is Dr. Quinn, medicine woman.
Finally, a woman.
Hey, how are ya? Hey, how are ya? Hey, how are ya?
Ugh.
On Starship Winkler.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back the host of Jimmy at the Crossroads, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Always helps to turn on the mic. Yes, indeed. Welcome, folks, back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Once again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner here on this very program. And folks, I am so pleased to have on the show as we talk about leadership and turmoil. It's always good when you can get perspective from someone who really knows about strategic communication and crisis communication. That's why I'm so pleased to welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, good friend of mine and of the show, Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives. She's the host of Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and the Real Leaders with Roshini podcast, which can be found on your favorite podcast app. She's also a licensed attorney and former TV reporter, and she is a absolute guru when it comes to communication, which is one of the big reasons why for 6 years now I've been having conversations with Roshini. Her book is Communicate That, and it's in its 3rd edition, read by thousands of people in the U.S., Canada, and Asia. Of course, her website, ownyourwow.com. Roshini Rajkumar, welcome back to the Crossroads.
Thank you. And Jimmy, thanks for such a generous introduction. It really has been terrific talking politics and leadership and just brand management with you over these many years. And it's amazing because current events just keep on giving.
No, there's no shortage. And it seems like every time we have you on, especially because you live in Minneapolis, Roshini, we have been talking of late in our previous conversations about what's happening in terms of the chaos around the country. But I do want to say, since I have had you on my programs for now 6 years, 6 years this month, I think it was 2014, August of 2014, I first interviewed you, that next month, so tomorrow, I guess September starts, but we'll mark a decade of AM radio for yours truly. And my show on 710 KNUS, the Jimmy Sengenberger Show, will hit its 7-year mark.
Which is just amazing. Congratulations. And also, I always like to say, I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers know this, but for someone who is a young leader, I mean, you've really accomplished a lot. So I'm really proud to know you, Jimmy.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm proud to know you as well, and to have you able to provide insights on our show that I've always wanted to share with folks, because especially when it comes from the leadership standpoint and the crisis. I mean, being a crisis communication coach, what are we facing right now but constant crises, Roshini? And let's start there. We'll get to the conventions in a few moments, but I was just talking about Ted Wheeler and his comments, I would say deflecting from any blame and just pushing it off on President Trump for the chaos that's even engulfed his own city. What do you make of where things are at right now?
You know, it's very dangerous for any leader right now to completely criticize another leader. And even though you and I have had disagreements over Donald Trump's behavior as president, I think we both agree the office of the White House, the office of the presidency, is something to be honored by all. So, yeah, it was interesting to see the mayor of Portland come out in the way that he did. What I want to say is just someone who's a lover of safety and civility is each of these leaders, whether it's a mayor, a governor, a legislator, really needs to take a hard look at what is going on in his or her own state, city, region before you point fingers at anyone else. Take care of your own backyard, so to speak, because Portland is not happening in a vacuum. And if you were really in touch with Portland, again, I don't want violence there. I'm nonpartisan, so for me, this isn't about politics. Take a look at what's happening and figure out where are the gaps in leadership in your own community that things like this are happening in Portland or Seattle, or for that matter, in my hometown of Minneapolis.
Yeah, well, when we talk about the chaos and in these inner cities, I mean, yes, rhetoric from the president of the United States can help, it can hurt, or it can be neither. And we can have a discussion about that. But at the same time, what happens on the ground in these cities is much more about whether or not I think these cities are willing and able to handle that, to allow their police to make sure that there is some semblance of law and order, or if it gets out of hand. One of the things that I've argued on this program for weeks and months now, Roshini Rajkumar, is that our politicians around the country have emboldened these people to be more brazen as to continue, like for months, looting and rioting and all of those things, without any seeming end to that kind of chaos. Because if the police aren't able to do their job in addressing the violence, then it's going to continue to persist. I mean, we had a rally here in Denver a couple months ago, or a month and a half ago, and it was the 6th annual pro-police rally, and it was literally attacked and shut down within 2 or 3 minutes of starting the event. I was supposed to speak. I was playing harmonica. I couldn't even play. And it was stunning to think that that could happen, and it's happening across our country, I think, because of a failure, more than anything, of local leadership to say, this is unacceptable and we're not going to tolerate it.
Right. And there's really been such a backlash against the police. Now, look, I don't think anyone's going to disagree. We need police reform across the country, but bashing every single officer, every single person wearing a badge isn't the answer. Because then at the same time, when there is a shooting or a killing, and that's happened in so many cities around the country, you're turning to law enforcement to handle the situation. So they are stuck definitely between a rock and a hard place. So I think we have to also understand that freedom does matter. First Amendment rights do matter. But when people are getting violent and then saying and hiding behind the First Amendment, that's when leaders need to call the bluff and say that just won't fly. We have a sheriff here in the county where Minneapolis is, called Hennepin County, Sheriff Hutchinson, and he has said, look, violence will not happen, on his watch as the sheriff. So his department supports the city of Minneapolis and many other areas in Hennepin County. But he's been very hard-lined, not in a violent way, but he said, look, law and order is going to happen and my deputies and I will support that. You can make that statement as a leader and you're not going to lose votes, because guess what? The majority of the people in any community are law-abiding citizens. They will re-elect you if you keep some kind of order and peace and not have the city go up in flames. And here in Minneapolis, it not only happened to such a large degree at the end of May, it happened again last week where parts of the city got burned. Businesses for no reason were just busted into because there was a false report that there was an officer involved shooting. Turned out to be a murder suspect killed himself. I mean, this is crazy. We need to get the facts before we react. And if we do react, why is violence the first step? That should not be accepted.
Well, and that is the thing is we can look at the tragic shooting of Jacob Blake last week, so now a little over a week ago now, I think it was. And there's a lot more to that story for discussion and to understand the facts. And yet already that night we saw the rioting happen. It took no time. They just said, oh, opportunity, let's go ahead and do this again. And that is just not what we should be having in our society. But one of the things, and this gets us a little more into the political side, Roshini Rajkumar, is one thing that I've noticed is the Democrats have changed their tune a little bit over the course of the last week and a half. I mean, here in Colorado, I first noticed it 2 Saturdays ago. We had riots and looting that broke out in downtown Denver, Colorado. The next day, Mayor Michael Hancock of Denver and Governor Jared Polis of Colorado both put out strong statements, stronger than anything I'd seen in months of this kind of thing happening previously, condemning it. Some stores were absolutely devastated, family-owned businesses, and they were rightfully condemning it, but it was a little late. I thought it was striking that it wasn't until last Sunday that I noticed that kind of stern language coming from them. Then Joe Biden finally speaks about it after the Republican convention consistently talked about the rioting, looting, violence that's happening in our streets, the lack of law and order, and the Democrats didn't even touch it. So I just find it striking that the Republican convention emphasizes this. Polling data shows that the American people are fed up with violence and mayhem in the streets, and the Democrats are finally talking about it at least a little bit.
You know, what I wish that national and local reporters would do is do more of those follow the money stories. This isn't just about the First Amendment. When you have cities for no reason having this violence and people being afraid to go to their own downtowns. One of my regular contributors on my show was at a restaurant having a peaceful night last Wednesday. He could hardly get out of downtown because this was going on around him. Follow the money. When downtowns are burned up and citizens aren't even feeling safe. I mean, these visuals coming out of my city just break my heart. And remember, this was the same city that in 2018 hosted the Super Bowl, in 2019 hosted the men's Final Four. Do you think we're going to get those kinds of events back here? Not anytime soon. We are slated to have the women's Final Four in 2022. And, you know, this is happening. Your state and your city, Denver, is a popular convention city. So when this kind of violence happens, it's not just happening in a vacuum.
No.
It means major things. When events actually go back to happening again, they're not going to look at Denver. They're not going to look at Minneapolis or Portland for places where millions of dollars could then come in. So follow the money stories are really what I would recommend national and local reporters do, instead of just talk to the latest person who perpetrated violence or what are the latest crime statistics.
Right.
And we need to move the conversation to a more productive place.
Well, absolutely. But something else, too, is that this literally, the looting and the rioting literally has nothing to do whatsoever with the First Amendment, because my rights stop where they trample upon your rights, Roshini. And that is what we're seeing across the country with this. If you're destroying property, you are trampling upon somebody's right, in that case, to property. And what's stunning, too, is I see these videos of so-called Black Lives Matter activists saying, oh, the businesses, they've got insurance. Consider this. There was one video clip, I wish we had it, we don't, but of a woman saying, consider this reparations. And it's entirely right to do this because, you know, businesses, they have insurance. We don't have insurance. I'm like, first of all, insurance doesn't cover as much as you think it does. Second of all, it can take a long time to recuperate your business after it has been absolutely devastated. Third, it's not like there's just an endless sum of money out there. And fourth, you are devastating communities. Imagine those people who are in lower income demographics who may have worked at a restaurant or a shop that has been just put out of business for 2 extra months after COVID really hit with lockdowns and everything. Because of this mayhem, those people are out of work longer term.
Yeah, the reparations rhetoric is just kind of a load of you know what. I mean, here's the thing. You put out one small business, whether it's owned by a white person, a brown person, a black person, a native person, you are affecting dozens, if not hundreds of lives. There's a very successful restaurateur. He's a James Beard award-winning chef who has 3 successful restaurants in Minneapolis and one of the suburbs of Minneapolis. Well, the one in one of the suburbs, he had to close a couple months ago after reopening Starbucks. started because it was really more of a seasonal restaurant, and with all the limitations and just some of the other issues. So, and think about it, his other restaurants are in downtown Minneapolis. He's a very successful restaurateur who had probably more than 100 employees. If he's closing a restaurant, think about the ones that aren't that successful, employ 20, 30 people.
Oh, yes.
All of those lives and families are touched and hurt.
Especially when you're coming out of COVID-19 lockdowns, which already were putting businesses at a disadvantage, and they already still are coming back into business. They're not remotely at full capacity. In a lot of states and localities, you have to be outside. You can't have your customers indoors at the restaurant at this point in a lot of places. So it really
I'm going
is.
to just give you a really quick personal
Please.
kind of anecdote that I can tell you. So it's for your viewers and listeners to really understand the visual here. So WCCO TV, which is the CBS affiliate in Minneapolis, they have a rooftop where they sometimes do their live shots. There's a garden up there that the meteorologists actually sometimes do their forecasts and weather reports from. My husband and I got married on that rooftop 4 summers ago. It's beautiful. The views of the city are amazing. Kitty corner across the street from WCCO TV, right in one of the central locations of downtown Minneapolis, is an English pub called Brit's Pub. It's a corner restaurant with other businesses, coffee shops around it. That was one of the businesses, Brit's Pub, right there, that got bashed and set on fire last Wednesday night. I mean, so think about it. Like a place that 4 years ago, if you would have told me as I was getting married on that WCCO TV rooftop garden that this was going to be happening in 2020, I would have thought you were crazy. And now it's just, I haven't been downtown. I can't remember the last time I went downtown, Jimmy. And I'm a business owner who travels downtown a lot in the course of a week. And that's just where we are right now.
It's sad. It truly is sad and tragic. Again, we're talking with Roshini Rajkumar. Check out our website, ownyourwow.com. Let's shift into the conventions and kind of start on the convention point with the violence that we're seeing. I mean, obviously, Republicans were very emphatic about emphasizing this at the RNC last week. And just as a sample, here's President Trump in cut 2 talking a little bit about what has been going on and sort of his view of the Democrats. Again, this is a convention speech.
At the Democrat National Convention, Joe Biden and his party repeatedly assailed America as a land of racial, economic, and social injustice. So tonight I ask you a simple question. How can the Democrat Party ask to lead our country when it spends so much time tearing down our country? In the left's backward view, they do not see America as the most free, just, and exceptional nation on earth. Instead, they see a wicked nation that must be punished for its sins. Our opponents say that redemption for you can only come from giving power to them. This is a tired anthem spoken by every repressive movement throughout history. But in this country, we don't look to career politicians for salvation. In America, we don't turn to government to restore our souls. We put our faith in Almighty God.
That's sort of the intersection of the politics and what we're seeing and his expression of attitudes among Democrats. But I also want to play cut 5, just a snippet here, because this was one of the most powerful moments of the entire convention. It was last Thursday night. Ann Dorn, the wife of the murdered former police officer, retired police officer David Dorn, himself a black man, she spoke at the convention.
It was a violent night in St. Louis. 4 officers were shot. Others were hit with rocks and fireworks. At least 5 businesses were damaged, looted, or set on fire. As the officer wellness coordinator and CIT coordinator with the police department, I was keenly aware of the rioting and spent the evening getting ready to mobilize support for officers who were impacted. After I'd gone to bed, David received a call from Lee's Alarm Company. The front door of the pawn shop had been breached. This time he didn't wake me up to tell me. He probably knew I would have tried to stop him or insist on going.
So I hate to interrupt Dan Doran there. It was absolutely powerful, but the clip is a little too long. Roshini Rajkumar, what did you make of that and the dynamics that played out at the Republican convention versus the Democratic convention when it comes to this issue of mayhem across the country?
Right. Well, whether it was luck, coincidence, or just reality, maybe a combo of all, the Republicans were able to use the very real violence that has been going on, was going on during their convention on the streets of the United States, and really focus that police and public safety message. Another positive for them is how, for the GOP, is how they used personal anecdotes. And there is an example of a very real person sharing a very real story. Does not matter what party you are connected with, it is hard not to be moved by that. And those are some of the messages that the GOP wanted you to take away. Now, there were certainly parts of President Trump's speech that I would have done away with. It went on too long. He had some tall tales in there. But overall, the GOP was able to use these personal stories and how they countered the fact that they weren't all together in some huge traditional convention as we know it. They were able to bring some of these stories to life. And I'd say in comparison with the Dems, in a much more stronger and visual way, partly because of the cinematography, partly because of the voices they chose, and also because they were not hard and fast and strict with the mask rules that are out there. And however that plays itself out, the American people saw the visuals. And overall, just from a delivery standpoint, I would give the Republican convention stronger marks as far as overall show and delivering of message and maybe hitting home with your base over the Democrats.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think that when we look at the way in which they wove together the entirety of the convention, it was interesting seeing, and I've talked about this before last week, it was interesting seeing that there was one location with a podium where most of the speakers got up and went to. So there seemed like there was some cohesion to it. There was a narrative that was being built up in terms of the videos, in terms of the video messages, like the one we saw from Ann Dorn. And then you had First Lady Melania Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and President Trump speaking in front of actual live human being audiences. Very different contrast for the Democrats. How did you assess the Democrats and how they went about their convention?
Right. Well, the thing is, when you're able to actually speak in front of people, there's just a natural energy that helps the speaker, even more than the audience, it helps the speaker. And with the Democrats, sometimes it's harder to go first because you have no real comparison and you're going to do it the way you're going to do it. But they really went with this virtual push, and that hurt them in those bigger space moments, because when you see like a Kamala Harris or even Vice President Joe Biden at that stage, and then when they pull out to the wide shot and you're looking at people clapping on different screens, or you're looking at, each state represented by one person sitting well spaced in the audience, it's a completely different feel. It's a completely different look. I mean, even on the stage, when you see Joe Biden and Dr. Biden with masks, black masks on their faces, that is not an appealing visual, even if they're trying to show they're upholding various mask rules. So the GOP let itself have a little more flexibility and really played to the cameras as best they could in a non-traditional convention way.
And that shouldn't be surprising either, because President Trump is a showman. He did television for years. He brought in a couple of producers from The Apprentice. Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, was also involved in television news and entertainment news before. Particularly, she was on Inside Edition, was a producer there. So she understands, and they really brought that out, I thought, in a very effective way. I know we got to let you go, Roshini Rajkumar, so just a final thought before we do.
Well, what I hope is that the American people, first of all, go out and vote, but also are very discerning as the next couple months of messages come through on TV screens, online, in digital atmospheres, on the radio, and really listen. And if you can, be the one that reaches out to your local media, to your national media, and hold them accountable for covering things in an accurate way, for following the money, and because it is going to be a very important election. And we still have a couple months to get through before Election Day. It's important that we, the people, hold leaders as well as the media accountable.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Roshini Rajkumar, check out her book, Communicate That, Your Toolbox for a Powerful Presence. So great to talk with you, as always, my friend. Have a great weekend. Stay safe there in Minneapolis.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Have a great week.
Thank you. You as well. Once again, Roshini Rajkumar joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, strategic communication and crisis coach. Always great to get her fascinating insights on what's happening across the country at any time, but especially now when we are facing crises. Really quick, I just want to close by playing a clip from yesterday, or from, I think it was Friday, on PBS. PBS NewsHour. David Brooks is one of their two regular contributors on that program. And in their segment on Friday, he made an interesting comment that I wanted to share and respond to real briefly.
The Democrats, I think, have come to understand they somehow got on the wrong side of order. And they got it somehow attached, even though Biden is not actually attached to it, to the idea of defunding the police. And they need to somehow make some gesture to show they understand the insecurity of the American people. The country has been through an anxious time with the pandemic, economic turmoil. There's just this great sense of fear and a sense of unsafety, physical unsafety from the pandemic and everything else. And somehow they have to address that. Now, a lot of the law and order talk is code word for racism. There's no question about that. But I think a lot of it is not. And I think Democrats would be making a mistake if they just said, oh, you're all just a bunch of crypto racists. I think people have legitimate concerns about expressing their opinions safely, about living safely. And so I think Biden really would do well by himself to somehow address this issue and say, no, we're for policing. We want to reform policing, but we will keep you safe.
Yeah, that is exactly right. The last part about the fact that there are people who, sure, I mean, anybody's going to use anything that they can, exploit it as cover for their own movement. So I'm sure that there are some racist people who are using law and order as a way to go about that. But by and large, what we're seeing is what David Brooks described as a genuine concern from Americans across the country for law and order. But what was interesting was the first part of that statement. Democrats, quote, somehow got on the wrong side of law and order. You think, David Brooks? Here's the thing. Democrats have been on the wrong side of law and order throughout this entire situation of the last 3 or 4 months. Like that's not even in dispute, because while they have talked about Black Lives Matter and how important racial justice is, they also allowed and did not condemn and did not forcefully try to stop the rioting, the looting, the chaos, the violence, and the mayhem going on across the country. It wasn't until last week that we started seeing Democrats like Joe Biden speak out a little more forcefully about what we're seeing with this mayhem. So it's not that the Democrats somehow let law and order get away from them. It's that they literally let it get away from them. They ignored it. They set it aside. It's not a somehow. We know how it happened because of their rhetoric, because of their tolerance for this kind of violence and chaos. So, of course, it's going to get away from them because they let it get away. They didn't care about it. They didn't show concern for it. And a little bit of lip service now is not going to cut it, especially with what the polling data shows about how Americans are feeling right now with regards to the chaos, with regards to the rioting and looting. They're over it. We showed polling data on Friday's show about exactly that. The American people are over this, and the Democrats are behind the times. And they're going to continue to be behind the times unless they start speaking out firmly and taking actual action in these cities that are controlled by Democrats. Minneapolis, talking with Roshini Rajkumar. Minneapolis, prime example of that, going back to the very beginning of all this. Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, has been feckless. You look at Portland, you look at Seattle. Heck, you look at Denver and Aurora, Colorado at times. There's one thing to be said for racial justice and for advocating for change and reform with police. Rand Paul's done that. He put forward the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act. But as we talked about on Friday, Rand Paul was attacked by so-called protesters who surrounded him and his wife after the Republican National Convention, as they were going to their hotel, trying to obstruct their way, their path. That's what's going on here. And it is the local communities, local mayors, local city councils, those folks, the local police that need to be enforcing the law and demonstrating that they do, in fact, care about law and order. There you see what happened to Rand Paul last week as he grips on to a police officer so that they would stay close to one another. Yes, the Democrats let it get away from them. They let it get away from them. David Brooks saying somehow let it happen. They didn't care enough to stop it from happening. And that's what's going on. And that's why they're not viewed as law and order advocates right now. Make no mistake, it's playing out right now with electoral implications. It shouldn't help President Trump. It shouldn't help the Democrats. It shouldn't hurt the Democrats. It shouldn't hurt President Trump. We should just be all rallying together and getting control of the situation. But the reality is, politically, it is helping President Trump because people are seeing what's going on. And they see how feckless the Democrats have been of late. And just keep that in perspective as you continue to watch the news of the day unfold. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads in partnership with the Washington Examiner. That is it for us today. My thanks to Roshini Rajkumar, a tremendous guest today, rejoining us on the program, to Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, to our partners and friends at the Washington Examiner, and most of all to you for watching, subscribing, liking, sharing our content. Please do share what we've got. Appreciate you joining us. Have a great week. We'll be back on Wednesday with more Jimmy at the Crossroads Washington Examiner Wednesday. Tune in then. For now, stay well. Gosh, I can't talk today. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay safe, and may God bless America.